Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, we're diving straight into sales, but actually sales that is like one step behind actually closing the deal. I want to talk about the discovery call. And what I really hope is that whoever is listening around the world, no matter what industry you're in, if you're a graphic designer, a wedding planner, or even a coach like Nikki and I are as well, you'll find that this conversation in this episode is very fruitful for you. And the bottom line is, and what I really want to simplify, is how to close more discovery calls. And caveat with the right people as well. So my special guest today is Nikki Rausch, and she is the CEO of Sales Maven. It's an organization dedicated to authentic selling. She really helps people transform the misunderstood process of selling altogether. Now, she comes to the table with incredible experience, over 25 years selling to prestigious organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Hewlett-Packard, NASA, and so many more. So she has shattered sales records in incredible industries, receiving multiple top producer awards all along the way. She's also the host of the Sales Maven podcast, so she's going to show us how to sell successfully and authentically without being pushy or salesy, which, sign me up, I'm all in. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Nikki Rausch. Hey, Nikki.
Hey, Mary. Thanks so much for having me.
I love geeking out with other podcasters, and I really love to talk about sales, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
And so let's just imagine no one's listening right now. It's just you and me having this conversation, right? Because sometimes sales can be a little bit scary to talk about, that there is actually a strategy behind it and all things. But I want to clarify, like authentically selling without being pushy. What does that mean to you?
So it means two things. One is that sales isn't something you do to somebody. It's something you do with somebody. And the foundation of everything I teach is built on rapport. And so I often will say it's relationship first, rapport always. Yeah. And when you start to transform your idea of that, your job isn't to convince somebody to buy from you. Your job is to connect with somebody, understand what their problem is, what the need is, what the want is, and then clearly lay out how your offer meets that need, that want, that desire. And if it doesn't, you still have the relationship intact and you can kindly bless and release that person from your life or from that conversation.
Yeah. And you know what? I wonder why people are so afraid of sales in general. Funny enough, coincidentally, a friend of mine on Facebook late last night sent out a rant post, and he said this. He said, if I get another post in my Facebook feed of a friend who's inviting me to an offer or signing up because they got a last few spots, I'm just going to lose it. And I had to kindly and gently say to him, like, hey, small business owners, if we don't sell, if we don't invite people in, we don't have a viable business. I mean, it's not like we're just doing this as a hobby. What would you say to those naysayers out in the world who go, I hate being sold to all the time?
I would say in a really kind way, then remove yourself from those situations so that people aren't able to reach you in that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And really that's your choice. But remember that when you're on social media, when somebody signs up for your email list, you putting out your content in your way, as long as it isn't gross and aggressive and pushy and negative and, shameful and all these things that are the tactics that usually make people feel cringy about sales, then it is your job to continue to put yourself out there and to continue to make invitations for people. And I often say this to clients who are like, I'm afraid to send this out because, what if somebody doesn't like it? I'm like, well, we're not sending it out for the person who doesn't like it. We're sending out for the person who needs it. And your job is to be there when the person needs it and offer them the offer that is going to change their life or enhance their world in some way. And that's why we do what we do. And so for the person who's like, I don't like to be sold to, usually it's because they've had it done horribly. And that's why
Yes.
they're turned off by it.
Yes.
And when you start to transform and spend time around people who have learned the skill of selling, who are doing it from an authentic place of wanting to be of service, and then all of a sudden it gets easier. I just had somebody recently say to me, I actually like every time you try to sell to me, Nikki, whether I want to buy whatever it is or not, because it feels good and it should feel good to them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the key, right? Ethical selling is not spreading the word of, oof, not enough. You are lacking this, and this in your life. And that's what I think has really rubbed so many of us. And, I'll be the first to admit, I've been on the receiving end of pretty crappy sales pitches or emails out of the blue wanting me to sign up for something, and they've not nurtured a relationship with me whatsoever. They don't even understand what my actual problems and needs are. I get it. Yeah, I think it's the whole, like, you're not shaming people into not enoughness, right?
Yeah. I actually like the approach of even more, right? Like if you are at this level, if I can show you how to be even better at something, or I can show you how to arrive there quicker, or accomplish your goal in an easier way, then it feels like I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just saying this is what this will do, right?
Yeah.
And those like cringy emails and the stuff where somebody who hasn't really developed any rapport, I spend a lot of time focused on the language of sales. That's my jam. That's the piece that I love, and I talk about it constantly. Some of the things are really common ways that we speak. And frankly, it's some of the common ways that people teach. But these common phrases that people use are cringy and do turn people off, especially if you don't have any rapport with somebody.
That's right.
So all of these messages that say, I know what you're thinking. I know where you've been. I know where you're going. Like, you don't know me. Like, stop telling people what you know about them. They don't, like, I know I'm sick of it, and I know a lot of people are sick of it.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than showing up into a conversation with somebody who's like right off the bat, like, Mary, I can read your mind. I know everything you're thinking. And you're like, we just met. Like, you don't know me. You don't know my history. You don't know what I'm thinking. Like, unless you're psychic, which I have yet to meet anybody who can truly read somebody's mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So knock it off.
And this is such refreshing information to hear, because I think a lot of times we've been beat upside the head by the jab, jab, punch concept of selling that's out there in the last 10 years. And, not to discredit those people that are I call it like dude bro marketing,
Yes.
Yeah, it probably has its place and time, and it probably works well in some industries. For me, as a woman, doesn't work for me, doesn't work for my clients either. And so I'm so glad to hear a fresh, different approach to sales. And I hope that this really prefaces our conversation of really getting into the how-to for anyone that's listening right now that was like, oh, I don't know if I'm good at sales or not. The truth is you can be, because it doesn't have to be the cringe, gross, yuck stuff.
Yeah, you can be authentic and you can be yourself. The piece that I focus on is the structure and the strategy. Because if you have a structure and if you have a strategy and you know where you're going, it allows for your own personality to come through and to be more effective. And frankly, it makes the interaction for the prospect so much more comfortable when you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And so to recap of what you just said so far, what I hear in that is to really reframe in your mind that the concept of sales is together. Sales, in essence, is problem solving for people, right? It's not about pushing. It's helping them get one step closer to solving their problem, or one step away from pain or the suffering that they're in right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not about, I said this too of like your job isn't to try to convince anybody
Yeah.
or to shame anybody. And I think there is this idea that I have to walk up to somebody and give them 100 paper cuts and then go, "Oh, bless your heart, you're bleeding. You need my services." No, they're bleeding because you cut them. You don't need to cut anybody. You don't need to convince anybody.
Yeah.
You just need to find out what's going on for them. Do they have a problem? Do they have a need? And do you have a solution that will solve it? And if not, like, let's move on to the people who are ready for us. And if you do, then put it in a way that's palatable. Put it in a way that they can consume it, understand it, and take the next step with you.
So good. So I want to dive into the practical, real how-to stuff so people can really follow along. I hope you have your pen and paper and you're taking notes. So a discovery call is a call that you do with the prospective client before they go and sign at the dotted line or open their wallet and say, yes, I want whatever it is. And that is a place for answering questions. It's not a place for selling, right? So talk to us about that.
Yes. So I teach a 5-step process to sales, and I call it the selling staircase. I wrote a book about it. And step 3 in the selling staircase is this discovery call. And the purpose of the discovery call is to understand what the need is and to ask strategic questions that lead the person to hiring you, to lead the person for them to start to self-identify, oh, this person knows something, has something, can solve some problem for me. And you do it in this way that makes it really easy to kind of move to the next step in the process. And you're absolutely right. Step 3 is not about selling. Your job, frankly, shouldn't be a lot of talking. It should be a lot of asking questions and listening.
And equally, if somebody is on a discovery call, tell me if this is right or wrong. But if they are on a discovery call, you probably already pre-qualified them in your sense of matrix of like, are they the right fit for me too, right?
I'm going to say that's probably 60 to 70% true. You will get people who will show up, because they heard something about you, but they didn't really do any research. Like you're going to get those. But for the most part, once somebody's gotten to that discovery call, they do understand they have some type of a need. And they understand in some way that you might have a solution for them. And what we're really trying to do in the discovery call as the seller is to find out what are the crucial things that's going on for this person and how do I earn their business? And that's through asking the right questions in the right way that lead people down this path to hiring you. And so that's, I feel like I could go more, but I'm going to wait and see what you want to talk about.
Well, then equally, if it's not a match, then this is the place for you to not waste any time putting a scope of work together or a big proposal or presentation meeting. Like you also can equally say, wow, this isn't really a fit because you really need X, Y, and Z. Let me refer you to somebody who can do that, right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this is a really great time for you, especially as us entrepreneurs. Like if you're an entrepreneur, one of the best things about being an entrepreneur is you also get to pick who you work with, right? Like you're not being forced to take on clients necessarily. So it's absolutely fine for you to respectfully decline business at this point. If you get a sense this isn't the right fit for me, or this person is asking me to put together a scope of work that frankly isn't going to make me money, and I don't really want this job, then it's an opportunity for you to say in a really kind way, thank you so much for your interest. I get a sense that I am not the right fit for you. So I'm going to respectfully decline moving forward. But I really appreciate this time. It was nice to meet you, and I wish you well. And just saying that is enough for the person to leave and go about their business, go find somebody that is going to be the solution for them. And frankly, when you can do that in a way that feels like it's done with kindness, chances are when they meet somebody who they think, oh, that person is a good fit for Mary, they're going to go, oh, you should call Mary. I talked to her. She's a straight shooter. She'll tell you whether or not you're the right client for her.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Nikki, this works. It works. It works. It works. Back in one of the early iterations of the Simplifiers, so when we first started 17 years ago, we were in the events industry. So we produced weddings and corporate events and all that. And I had a system exactly this through the discovery call where if I had any sort of red flag, gut feeling, or the budget was off, or just personalities were just not going to be a match, in the discovery call, I would just say, hey, it's not a match. However, I think that you would be so great with this wedding planner or whatever. And I would already have this referral system built in and say, hey, you need to talk to Gina. You need to talk to Tacey. And the client, the prospect that just got rejected, are always so grateful that I said this up front, because here's the bottom line, especially in weddings, but I know this relates to all industries. You're in bed with this person for 3, 6, 9 months. And if it's a hot mess at the beginning and not a match, it will be a hot mess for the whole relationship going through to the end of the project. And that, nobody wants that. They're always so grateful to get a referral and say, no, thank you at that point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that you shared that story of like having this referral network. Now, I also do this too. I will refer people to other people unless I get a sense that, ooh, I don't know that I want my name attached to this referral.
Yes.
So then I wouldn't drop any other names for refer because I don't want them to go like, Nikki Rausch referred me.
Can't believe her.
Go, thanks a lot, Nikki. This was a nightmare, right? Like we don't want those.
Yeah.
So I would say give yourself permission to not always be the person to give the resource, but do give the resource when you do get a sense of, you know what, this person would be so much better served with working with, this other planner or this other designer or this other coach. Like do that because I think it shows your level of integrity. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like who wants the mess at the beginning and the mess at the end? And I know in my business, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I absolutely cherish the clients that I have, and they bring and refer some of the very best, amazing clients because my job, part of my job into deliver and the kind of coaching that I do is I want to create ambassadors for myself in the marketplace.
Yes.
There's nothing better than somebody who doesn't have any attachment to me other than they've worked with me to be like talking to a friend going, you know who you should work with is Nikki Rausch. And here's why. Like there's nothing better than that person showing up going, Casey referred me to you and she has nothing but great things to say. Awesome. they've already done all of the rapport building to a point where now I just got to take it up and run, it and run.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. 100%. So what do you think then are the subtle cues or buying signals that people put out into the world or specifically put out to you when they're interested in doing business with you?
Well, one is they ask questions. So questions oftentimes are a sense of buying signals. They'll ask you about, I'll give you some of the common buying signals, and then I'll give you a couple of the really easy ones to miss. Okay. Mm-hmm. So one of the really common buying signals is they ask you about your pricing. Okay, so if we're already talking about pricing, there's a pretty big buying signal there. Yeah. And your job when you get a buying signal is to invite the person to whatever the next logical step is. Sometimes the next logical step is go ahead and give me your credit card and I'll deliver the product or the service.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's let's move to the next phase in the process where we put together a scope of work and then we can review it, making sure that you always get that next phase scheduled before you end the first conversation when you're getting buying signals. So always issuing an invitation to go to the next step to check it out. Because there will be every once in a while, somebody will ask you about your pricing and they'll be like, I was just curious. They really didn't have an interest in hiring you. And that's okay. And when you get a buying signal, every single time you have to answer the question, check it out, issue the invitation, and see if it's a buying signal. So that's a kind of a really common one, pricing. And it seems obvious. But more often than not, I hear people say things like, oh, well, just go check out my website. Or here's my business card.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
You have to do something in the moment. Don't ask them to have to go take some action to do because, frankly, they probably won't. And
Yeah.
then you'll have missed out on working with them.
Right, because it's too big of a leap, and it sounds silly, but it really is too big of a leap to send them to the homepage of your website, and then they have to dig through to find the information that they need. Yeah, 100%. And so these discovery calls are the place, as you said earlier, to ask good questions and really to answer and help them overcome any objections in their mind, right? But talk to me about pre-framing. What does that mean? Pre-framing the discovery call before you actually conduct them.
So pre-framing, and I'll give you an example of a pre-frame, but the objective behind a pre-frame is one, it's got a couple things to do. One, first and most important thing is it creates safety for the other person who's on the call with you. Because believe it or not, as much as you might want to earn their business, they may feel a little intimidated or nervous or even fearful about talking to you about whatever it is that you do because they see you as an expert. And so we got to create safety. We got to put their mind at ease because when you create safety, people breathe.
Yes.
They can take in your message. They can hear what it is that you're saying. And they're much more likely to be revealing about how to earn their business. So you're going to pre-frame to create safety. It also helps establish your credibility by doing a pre-frame. So the pre-frame is the thing that you do at the very beginning of the call. So an example of a pre-frame would be to say to somebody, Mary, thank you so much for taking this time with me today. I'm really looking forward to having this discovery call with you. We're scheduled to chat for about 20 to 30 minutes. Does that still work in your schedule?
Yeah.
So I'm going to check to make sure that Mary still has time for me so that if she's like, actually, I only have 10 minutes and then I got to go pick up my kids from school, right? Like I want to know that.
Yeah.
So I don't want her the whole time worrying like, is Nikki going to just keep talking and do I have to interrupt her and all of that. So we want to give the time. And then once she agrees that yes, that time still works for her, the thing that I'm going to say next is, now, in order to make this meeting meaningful and productive for you, is it okay if I start with a couple quick questions? Because I want to set the stage that I'm going to ask the questions. Because the person who asks the questions in a conversation tends to hold the power.
Yeah.
Now, we are going to want to balance the power a little bit in the way that we form some of the questions, but we want to take control of the meeting. Otherwise, you have somebody where you go, so tell me what you want to talk about today. And they go, so when I was 5, this thing happened. And then you're like, oh, now we're in story.
Yeah.
And story is a time suck.
Right. Or worse, you go, what do you want to talk about? And they go, well, how much does it cost? And they go straight to price, right? Yes. And you're like, oh, God.
Yeah. Now, if that's their question, I will say I do have a policy that if somebody asks you about price, you give it. And you follow up with a little bit more about some value. You establish some value around it. But when somebody asks you about your price, you can't say like, we'll get to that later. Like, no. If you act shady, like, I'm not sure I want to reveal my price to you yet. You're going to start to break down rapport, break down safety. So if that's their first question, answer it, issue an invitation to move to the next step with you, and then dive right back into your questions.
Great. That's so good. Now, what are the questions that you like to ask in the actual discovery call? So you talked about that 5 steps, your selling staircase. Let's break into that in particular.
So in the discovery call, there's a couple questions that I do like to ask. And I think I'll give the questions that I think are somewhat universal. I will say, depending on your business, there are specific questions about your, specific type of business that you're going to want to ask. And I will say, be careful here, because one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they often ask questions that they don't need the answers to until the person hires them. So be aware that your job here is to understand what's the need and what's the problem. And do I have a solution? It isn't to get into the nitty-gritty details. So for instance, as a graphic designer, you don't necessarily need to ask, what are your favorite colors? What's the theme that you're trying to invoke? Or you don't need all of that stuff information until they've hired you. Then you have an intake form or whatever. So now I've kind of gotten us off track here. So I'm going to come back to these some questions.
Yeah. No, I think this is so valuable. And I have to tell my clients the same when it comes to this as well. It's like, there's this maybe it's an ego place, because I've been very guilty of it in the past as well, where you just want to show people on the call that you know your stuff. So then you find yourself like spouting off like the kitchen sink, your expertise, or if you're a coach, coaching people in this call and going like, look, no, actually, I do know to do whatever it is that I'm offering. And you recommend that that's actually the wrong idea. Like, don't do that. Why is that?
Well, one is because if somebody shows up and they've got this problem or they've got this want, right? And you do a little bit of like, I'm going to show off my expertise here because I'm going to demonstrate like I got you. Like
I'm a badass.
I know a lot of stuff. I'm a badass. There you go. Okay, so here's the thing is I always say you're giving them like this tiny little nugget of coaching. Like you think you're giving them a taste. And I always compare this to like you're giving them like 1 grain of sand of your knowledge base because behind you there's this big, beautiful beach that has all your resources, all your expertise, everything that you bring to the table, and the way that you can really transform people's lives. And you give this little grain of sand because to you, it's like one little nugget, but you know it's going to like blow their mind a little bit.
Yes.
And they think that is the beach. And now they don't need to hire you. And frankly, they might go away going, I need to think about it. And then they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe how awesome Mary was. And I don't need to hire her because now I have something I can go and do and it's going to change my life. But you know that was like one little step.
Yeah.
And they need all these other steps to really get the outcome that they want. And you've done a disservice to them, frankly, because now they don't get access to your resources. Yeah. You've done a huge disservice to your business because now you've missed out on working with an ideal paying client. And you really haven't done anything for anybody by showing off your expertise. And I say that really with kindness and love too, because believe me, I love to coach. I could coach all day long. I used to always say, if people would just pay to ask me questions, it would be the best job in the world. And then now people actually do pay to ask me questions all day long, but they pay me money. And because they pay me money, the other real big thing here is that when you give them that little nugget, that little like coaching piece of sand, and they go away, they're less likely to implement it because they didn't pay for it. So it doesn't have the same level of value than if they pay you money and you give them that same nugget, they go and implement and they get results. I always say, #implementers get results with my clients. Yeah. My clients get huge results. And it's because they pay me money. They've got skin in the game. They'll implement, they'll get results, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, working with Nikki changed my business or changed my life or whatever.
Yeah, it's so critically important. I see it and I hear it as well. So it feels like the better first question to ask is what?
I like to ask somebody, what's important to you this year regarding your sales goals? Like that's my question, but you can change it to your context. What's important to you right now regarding this graphic design project? Or what's the most important to you regarding hiring me to design your, wedding, whatever you're going to do, or your event, your actual reception or whatever. So ask, what's important to you? And look and actually write down, frankly, I will always say, write down their answers because the answers they're giving you, those keywords, those key phrases, those are gold nuggets. They're essentially saying, hey, if you can deliver back a scope of work or if you can deliver back a proposal to me or a solution offer to me that speaks my language, you're much more likely to get my business versus somebody who's like, this is what I do. Here it is. It's the same for everybody. There's no use to put together any customize or even talk you through the proposal because this is just the price. Hire me or not. Chances are it's going to be a not because they'll find somebody who will ask them this question. What's important to you in regards to insert your context? And then when you deliver back the proposal, when it's sales time, not in that moment, your job is not to, get their answer and then immediately start selling to them. That's a mistake. Yeah. But get their answer, write it down. And then when you put together your proposal, your scope of work, or even just when you're laying out the solution in step 4, which is the proposal, use their key phrases, use their key words. And then it's like, oh my gosh, Mary totally gets me. She
Yes.
listens, she sees me, and I feel confident that she is going to help me get the solution I need.
Yes, that 100%. And that's the key, is like listening to how they phrase what their problem is, or what their hopes and visions are as well, rather than sort of sending them back some industry jargon and synergizing and blah 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 that
Yeah.
feels robotic and cut and paste. I think that that's really key there. And think about any situation where you've been sold to, and exactly what Nikki said there, of just like, do you feel seen, heard, understood of what your pain, or maybe even a fear that you're sitting on, that this person or this company could help you overcome ever so slowly, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm.
And we just want to demonstrate to them that like you're going to get this solution. And so now it has value to it. So when you do lay it out, when you do lay out your pricing, or you do put that scope of work in front of them, it's a much easier yes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there is no convincing involved here. Like they're
Right.
in.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 5 steps are what again? Let's break that down. The selling
Okay.
staircase.
So step one is the introduction, and
Yep.
the objective in the introduction is to make a powerful first impression. So chances are this is happening on social media, or this is happening through your podcast, or this is happening because you just met somebody at an event. You want to make a powerful first impression.
Mm.
Step two is creating curiosity. This is,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, the most missed step in the selling staircase. Most people aren't sure how to create curiosity about their product or their service. So I teach a lot about creating curiosity, being able to do it in a way that makes people go, tell me more.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have some questions based on what you just said. So learning how to plant seeds, learning how to create curiosity. And oftentimes when you are able to create curiosity, that's when buying signals happen. So buying signals are verbal and nonverbal cues that people give that indicate interest. I did write a book about this too. That was my
Mm-hmm.
second book. It's buying signals. And so once you get the buying signal, or you've created curiosity in some way through your website or through a social media or podcast or whatever, now
Yeah.
we're moving to step 3, which is discovery. So
Mm.
we talked about what the objective there is. Step 4 is proposal. This is where you're laying out your offer.
Yes.
And then step 5 is the close. And the reason step 5 is its own step is because it's the second most missed step in the selling process. It's where you have to issue close language. You have to get the actual words out of your mouth that allows for somebody to decide, do I want to hire you? Yes or no. And so you're really in close. Oftentimes you're asking a yes or no question and
Mm-hmm.
making it easy for their brain to go, yes, I'm in, or I have a question, or I have an objection, but we have to get to that closed language. You can't just lay out a scope of work and say, let me know.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you'll lose that business.
That's not enough. And that see, I think that's the brilliance in your work. I think that so many times, and I'll stereotype, but I think a lot of women, we feel so nervous to actually put that in more direct terms. Because maybe there's fear of rejection. Maybe it's the sort of an undertone of people pleasing. We don't want to come off as pushy. Like we really sometimes fail to ask for the sale, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
break it down. Like, give us an example of closing language that people could use.
So I've just laid out an offer to you, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm going to say to you, Mary, does that sound like something you would be interested in moving forward with?
Yeah.
It's a yes or no question. That's one way to do it. Another way would be to say, after reviewing the proposal, is this something you are ready to move forward with? Or would you like to schedule your first session with me?
Mm.
That's a yes or no question, right? But we have to say them because here's the hard truth is that most people will not decide to hire you until you pose the question to them. And I heard a statistic about this. One of my clients shared it with me, so I'm not sure where the source is, but I'm going to share it anyway.
Yeah.
Is that the average adult has to make 35,000 decisions a day. That seems crazy, right? And I think if you're a parent, it's probably more. I'm not a parent, but I feel like parents probably are making more decisions than that a day.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing. Our brains are lazy and we're in decision fatigue. And if we don't have to make a decision in the moment, oftentimes we'll be like, I'll come back to it later, but then they never come back to it. So you have to pose the question, the decision question in front of the client so they can make a decision in that moment. And frankly, you're making it easier for them than for them to have to go away and think about it and, get back in touch with you in some way, which is a lot of effort.
Yes.
And when you ask your clients to make, or prospects, frankly, to make a lot of effort, most of the time they just won't because they're busy, because they're overwhelmed, because they're struggling in some way, which is why they need you. So make it super easy and ask the direct question.
So I guess it's different for every industry, but are you asking for the sale at the end of a discovery call, or is it asking for the sale at the point where they've received the proposal or presentation, or both?
So I'm always scheduling whatever the next step in the process is before I end the previous meeting. Now, you can go through all 5 steps of the selling staircase in one conversation. So you can absolutely issue close. What you cannot do, though, is you don't get to skip steps. As the seller, you don't get to skip steps. You don't get to walk up to somebody at a networking meeting or reach out to somebody through email and be like, hey, Mary, I listened to your podcast. Do you want to buy from me?
Yeah.
Because the answer is going to be no, I don't. I don't know who you are. I have no relationship, no rapport with you. No, I don't want to buy from you. Yeah. So frankly, stop doing that because that's a waste of time. So instead, you're going to move people through the selling staircase. And the only exception to moving through all 5 steps is the client or the prospect. They can skip steps, but you as the seller, you don't get to. So in the discovery portion of the call, as long as you've done the discovery and then you issue the invitation to go to proposal. So an idea would be, or an example of this would be, based on what you've shared with me, Mary, I have an idea of a way that we might work together. Are you interested to hear more about that? Now you give me permission, yes. Then I'll say, my recommendation for you would be to join the Sales Maven Society. This is my membership, and now I talk a little bit about it.
Yep.
And then I say to you, is that something you'd be interested in doing? That's issuing close language. Okay. Yeah. So I just went through from discovery, asking permission to go to proposal, and then from proposal to close. And then as soon as I issue that close language, I zip it. I be quiet and I let you respond.
And I think that's what's so interesting about the process and where I think your brilliance lies as well, because I think we just want to keep speaking. we don't want any awkward silences. We want to keep going, and because we just don't want to have that moment a lot of times, right? And this is critical for people to get over the mind leap to where they need to go to make a decision. You're trying to ease that process for them. Because I think a lot of times people go, oh, I need to talk to my partner, or, oh, I need to look at blah, blah, blah. But what you said in that, which I think is critical, is scheduling the next step before you go off the phone call, right? So let's dive into that more and that why this step is so critically important to actually increase your close rate.
Well, a lot of times people think that I need to think about it, or I need to talk to my partner, or I need to review whatever.
Yeah.
They go, oh, that's the kiss off. That's their way of not saying no, but saying no. Right. And I totally disagree. Right. And frankly, even if I'm only right 20% of the time, it's worth it because I earn 20% more business than all the people who don't do this. So I teach this to my clients. And if you start doing this in your own business as the listener, I can guarantee you're going to close more deals. So if somebody says, I need to think about it, or I need to talk to my husband, here's my response. Great. Is there any additional information that you need in order for you to make some decisions before we end the call? And they'll go, yes, I need this, or I need that, or no, I'm good. Then I'll go, okay, let's go ahead and schedule a circle back call now. Let's get it on our calendars. And then that way, I'll check in with you. We'll have this call scheduled. I'll answer any additional questions that come to mind for you. And then we can talk about best next steps for working together. Like, how much time do you need, do you think? And then I'm going to actually get it on my calendar. Because here's the thing. As soon as I get off the phone with them, I'm on to 5 million other things. And I don't want to spend any time or energy thinking like, should I call them today or should I email them? And what should I put in the message? No, if they're on my calendar, I don't need to think about it again until it comes up on my calendar. And if they need me ahead of time, they can reach out. But otherwise, I'm also on their calendar because as soon as they hang up from you or end that call with you, they're also on to 5 million other things. And by putting it on their calendar, you actually are increasing your chance of them spending time thinking about it and making a decision. Now, sometimes the decision will be before they get on the call with you. Hey, Mary, sending you an email to let you know I've decided not to hire you. Thank you so much for your time. Great. Now you don't need to waste any time on that
Perfect.
call with that person who's not going to be a client, instead of you trying to track them down again, right? And
Mm-hmm.
get on their schedule, which is super hard to do for people. So,
Yeah.
and then oftentimes when I get on a call, a circle back call with people, they're like, Nikki, I'm in. Here's my credit card. Let's go.
Yeah. And or worse, you're ghosted by somebody who, you're
Yeah.
like you keep sending them a message or an email or a DM and they're like nothing, nothing. And you're just like,
Yeah.
ugh, it's so exhausting. It's mentally exhausting for you, the
Yeah.
practitioner. It's mentally exhausting for them, especially if
Yeah.
they're just not ready to make to say yes to whatever your offering is. I think it's so smart. And I really encourage anyone who's out there listening right now, this week, starting today, start implementing this, what Nikki is saying, in your sales process and try it for the next 30 days. See if it actually works. And I'm willing to bet it will actually, in a profound way.
I'm confident that it will.
Yes,
Yeah.
because, these little simple tweaks make all the difference in the world. So I really encourage you guys, if you are curious and you want to learn more about Nikki and the work that she does, first off, go wherever you're listening to this podcast, go and search for Sales Maven podcast, subscribe to it. You've got an instant tap into Nikki there as well. But then her website is yoursalesmaven.com. And Nikki, I know you also have an ebook out that's all about closing the sale. Tell us about that.
So this is an ebook that really kind of walks you through step 3, 4, and 5 of the selling staircase. So it gives some language suggestions, gives you some mindset stuff to be thinking about. And really it's about boosting confidence for people. So I would love to gift that to your audience. They can get it by going to yoursalesmaven.com/simplify. Should be
Perfect.
easy for them to know. Simplify, which I
Good.
think is one of your maybe favorite words. It
Yes,
feels like,
I think
yeah,
so.
I feel like it's your word. So that's why we set it up for your audience, to yoursalesmaven.com/simplify. You'll get the book, you'll get the ebook, and then we'll be connected.
Perfect. Well, and all the links and everything that we talked about in today's episode will be found in our show notes. You can find that over at thesimplifierspodcast.com. And there as well, you'll have links to connect with Nikki directly, to her social media accounts. Where do you hang out the most? Facebook, Instagram?
I tend to hang out, well, for people who aren't already in my membership, I hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time in Facebook, but frankly, it's because that's where my group is. And I
Yeah.
pretty much only spend time inside the membership group answering questions and all the good stuff that goes with that.
Yeah. Well, all the links again are in our show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com. And I highly recommend this ebook. Is fantastic, and it gets you in the right framework and the right mindset for sales. And also, again, just getting you in a space. It's one step closer to helping you optimize and simplify your selling process. So highly recommend checking it out. So, Nikki, I have a few questions as we wrap up that I like to ask everybody. And again, thank you so much for your time. What's one book or blog you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Well, the book that I'm reading right now is called Wonderworks. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's called the 25 Most Powerful Inventions in the History of Literature. And it talks about how literature is a technology. And it's like wrapped around neuroscience. The author's name is Angus Fletcher. It is so interesting to me. My husband and I actually are reading it together. And even he's ahead of me in the book. So he's constantly telling me like, oh my gosh, this chapter is all about, how literature, teaches overcoming grief, or how it, creates curiosity, and like all the stuff that I really love. So it's so interesting, this take on. Of course, I love storytelling. Storytelling is a big part of who I am. I teach storytelling. And so being able to see how these brilliant storytellers of old, from way back, how they've used literature to help people overcome things and learn things. And I love it.
I love it. I always love hearing about new books. I've not had that on my radar. So again, this link for this book, if you want to check it out, is over at the show notes. So tell me, who's one person, somebody you know personally in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Well, I'm going to say my answer is Melina Palmer, and her business is called The Brainy Business, and she has a podcast with the same name, The Brainy Business, and it's all about behavioral economics and why people make the decisions, why they buy. And she has a book coming out in May called, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And it's fantastic. I got to pre-read it. I just love this concept of, again, oftentimes people aren't making decisions from the logical part of our brains. We're making decisions in places that aren't really that logical. But when you start to understand behavioral economics, more so than economics, all of a sudden it opens up new doors for you, I think, as a business owner. So I would say Melina Palmer. She's funny, she's sweet, she's super smart.
She sounds perfect. We'll definitely link her up in the show notes as well. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh boy. You know what I'm most grateful for right now is some of the lessons that I've been learning in my personal life, which like the overarching lesson has been about surrender. And frankly, it's a really hard lesson to be learning right now, but I'm grateful for it because it has revealed a lot of things and has challenged like my own beliefs about who I am and my identity. And so it's just been a really interesting time. So I'm grateful for these lessons that I'm learning.
I'm sure so many of us can say the same thing after the last year and a half that we've all been through here, and keep continuing going through. Your website again is yoursalesmaven.com for people if you guys want to check out her work and connect with her directly. But again, my last question is this, and just to take a moment to really connect and authentically validate the work that you're doing in the world, because I think this is so critically important when you can reframe sales, when you can just look at it a little bit differently, all of a sudden the floodgates open wide open for people. So you're doing great work out in the world, Nikki. I'm so grateful for you and what you do.
Thank you.
So my final question is this. Someone somewhere in the world is listening to us right now, and maybe she is coming through the spring reemerge and she's like ready to launch something else new in her business. The cloud of the pandemic is now behind her in some ways, and she's ready to really tackle her sales process and really optimize her discovery call process as well. But it's scary. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear just to encourage her in this moment?
I'm going to say that never be afraid to invite somebody to a discovery call or to work with you, because even if the answer is no, most of us like to be invited. And so it's flattering oftentimes for people to know that you would be interested in earning their business as long as you're doing it from a place of integrity. So never be afraid to invite anybody. And if the answer is no, bless and release, move on. But keep inviting people, because you're going to find somebody who's more scared, who's more struggling, who is going to be so incredibly flattered that you would even consider them as somebody who would be an ideal client for you, and you're going to change their life in some way. So please keep inviting people.
Yes, Nikki, big love to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.